Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us. This week we started a new series called 6 Things Every Family Needs. And Pastor Terry, you kind of started us off today just by talking about one very simple idea, that idea of time.
Yep.
And as simple as the word is, it actually has a lot of layers to it that you started us looking at today. Can you talk a little bit more about that to maybe recap some of those big ideas before we jump in?
We think of time and what some of us run out of time, some of us have way too much time on our hands. But what we said specifically this past week is that time matters. But more specifically, it's not just the time that matters, it's time over a continuous amount of time that really matters and has an impact. This past Sunday, I broke the hearts of every new parent because I said there are 936 weeks between birth and college. And so as you begin to count each week, in fact, Psalm 90:12 says this. It says, "Teach us to number our days, all right, so that we may gain a heart of wisdom." When we pay more attention to the time that we have in front of us, we have a greater impact. We utilize that time to our advantage. And it has a deeper impact long term in our family. And I know specifically we talked a lot about what that looks like.
Yeah, and that's the thing, just being aware of that number. I talk with a lot of parents, you do as well, who we see that number and we kind of cringe a little bit. Either because we realize, we don't have a lot of time left, or there's that feeling of guilt, we didn't use our time wisely because we didn't look at that number.
When I think of my life, and I think of an individual, and I don't even know his name, but it was a young pastor that was decided to take a moment into my life during a lunch and to invest 30 minutes of his time into my life. And that 30 minutes changed the course of my life because he asked me the first spiritual questions of my life that I really began to focus in on, which would change the course of history for my life patterns. He didn't know that in a year's time I would lose my mom at the age of 15, where at that time where I was lost, where I was defeated, where I didn't know what I was going to do, I leaned back onto words he spoke into me at that time, which then shaped the history of time that I had moving forward. And that's something we talked about this past week, is that time over time gives us a sense of history. It builds our history. And in fact, I want to read this to you. This comes from Proverbs 16:9. It says this, "In his heart a man plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps." And when I think back on how God determined in that man's heart to pour into me, how then that would impact my life at a very difficult time, to then create the course where my decisions, my thoughts, my actions would all be linked to a period of time that someone poured into me. Time over time in our family, when I as a dad pour into my son, when a mom pours into their daughter, when a husband pours into a wife, when a wife pours into a husband, then at the dinner table, at the ball field, when we over time take advantage of the time we have to have deeper conversations, deeper influencing comments, then those moments build a history that determines the thoughts, the decisions, the actions, which then can guide us closer to our Creator who determines our steps.
Yeah, so when we think about those steps, that's really the hard part, right? Because when we talk about, time over time, it matters, but time, every parent will say, where has the time gone, right? Every anniversary, there's a married couple saying, man, where has the time gone? It's always moving, it's always going past us. So how do we take those moments? How do we be intentional with that time that we have left? How do we be wise with those steps?
Well, and I think many of us as family members, as parents, we kind of look and we say, well, that's easy for you guys. You're pastors. You would know this. And it's like, no. It's the simple moments. It's the breakfast times. It's the lunch times. It's the conversations around a dinner table. It's the 5-minute conversations before a child goes to bed. It's the pillow talk time between husband and wife. It's the single adults who choose wiser friends than friends they've always known. Those are the decisions that allow us to invest in the time we have now, which then over time will build a better trajectory for our history, for our decisions, for our actions. And so as simple as having those moments and consistently allowing them to be a part of our lives now, making an intentional effort, and that's the biggest thing, is what can I do today to take advantage of the time that I have? Then I would just use one word: be intentional, be purposeful. This week, what is one of those moments that I mentioned, that you can be a little bit more focused and intentional with the time that you have, so you can create a history that you will look back upon. And instead of saying I wasted that time, you'll say I took full advantage of it.
And so that's really our challenge this week, right? Is to find that one thing that maybe we could identify and put into practice this week. How can we be intentional today in the present to build a better future history that we can look back on and say, wow, like we were really intentional. We spent every week, every marble, really investing in our relationship with one another. So that's our challenge this week. I hope that you have some good thoughts and discussions with others about that, and we'll see you next time.